We haven't seen a lot of women in tech. We haven't seen a lot of people using technology, specifically as women. So we don't look at it as a path for us. Like, my mom's a teacher, my dad's a preacher, so I never saw a path into technology or even business, or for lack of a better word, but like there was no path in my mind for that until I saw other opportunities for paths. Oh, I have a big mission-driven heart. Well, people are using technology to achieve mission-driven accomplishment.
Today, I have Brooke Markevicius on the podcast. She is the author of the new book, The Future Built by Women, Creating a Brighter Tomorrow Through Tech and Innovation, which is an incredible handbook if you are starting a business of any kind, especially if it involves tech solutions. So Brooke has been featured by Forbes and Fast Company. She was the creator, the founder of Alibi, which became acquired. And Brooke and I met many years when she was a member of my membership, Origin. And in today's episode, we talk about why women in tech, why women are here to build a more beautiful future, how to work within the GEMS framework to build anything of meaning, how to use community and lean into support, and also the difference between a bootstrapped business and a venture-backed business, positives and negatives about both, and what you need to know if you are building to sell. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to Plenty. I'm your host, Kate Northrup, and together we are going on a journey to help you have an incredible relationship with money, time, and energy, and to have abundance on every possible level. Every week, we're going to dive in with experts and insights to help you unlock a life of plenty. Let's go fill our cups.
Please note that the opinions and perspectives of the guests on the Plenty podcast are not necessarily reflective of the opinions and perspectives of Kate Northrup or anyone who works within the Kate Northrup brand.
Hi, Brooke.
Hey, Kate.
Thank you for being here.
Of course.
I was so excited to hear about your book, about you selling your company. It's just, and I know we've known each other on the internet for many years, and I want to go back to where were you when you first heard about my previous membership, Origin, and what were you doing in your life, and what had you join that community?
Yeah, I think I joined Origin right after your beta. I was actually just talking to somebody about this the other day. So I was like, when did I first hear about Kate? So I was pregnant with my second. So that would have been like almost 7 years ago. And I was in that phase of mom of one, toddler, getting ready to have another, but still bursting with ideas, but not knowing how to manage motherhood and business at the same time.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
And what were you doing work-wise at that time?
Yeah, so when I had my daughter about 10 years ago, I left working at Postmates. So in tech, when they were at about Series B, working in fast-paced startups, I wanted more flexibility. So I started freelancing and consulting in tech and loved that and was doing a lot of that throughout the time of having my first and into my second. But when I was about to have my second, I actually helped to co-found a co-working space called the Podworks in Tacoma, Washington, that was focused on integrating a space for motherhood and parenthood while building businesses.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was right before Alibi.
Right before Alibi. Mm-hmm. And before that, you were in the nonprofit sector.
Yes.
What were you doing there?
Yeah, so I started my career, I graduated in 2008 during the recession and thought I was going to be a teacher, but there were no teaching jobs actually at the time. And so I went into nonprofit and worked in a center for kids with extreme behavior and emotional issues, and then ended up joining a women's center that focused on women that were going through domestic violence situations and homelessness. And worked my way up there pretty fast into being a director of the domestic violence shelter and loved it, but also didn't see much of a flexible path once I started having kids. And so I fell into the world of tech kind of unintentionally, but also a little intentional. I had heard a lot about companies like Microsoft doing a lot of really great things for tech for good. So they were building centers in third world countries to help teach people technology to help get them out of poverty. And I was like, okay, there's a lot here that can be used for good. And so I decided to go back to grad school and dive into the world of tech.
And there was one particular video that you saw with your husband. Can you describe what was moving about that for you?
Yeah. So my husband showed me this video as he was onboarding for like a new role at Microsoft. And they were showing these third world countries where tech was being built, but also here in the States where they were going into low income communities and helping specifically women to get technology skills and helping them to learn more and eventually learn how to code, but as simple as learning how to set up email addresses and all of that. And so it was just a really impactful moment that kind of flipped a switch for me. That was like, this is something that can be used for good, not just, big corporations or getting a burrito to your door faster.
Right, which is where you started.
Yes.
Which I will just say, services like Postmates have made my life
100%
better. But you also are very mission driven,
Yeah.
and so you want to have that bigger impact.
Yes.
And that's actually, the data shows from the research I've done that, and I was interested in the parallels in what I read about the data in your book about women in tech and the trends you've seen. It's actually similar with women and money. That what we see is that when women have more resources, and I think we could say financial resources, technological skills resources, access to power and, and choices, what happens is we naturally invest in solutions that are good for the entire community. Naturally, everyone's outcomes get better, everyone's productivity gets better, everyone's health improves, all of that. And I'm just curious, from what you've seen being in tech, being around a lot of women founders, why do you think it is that that's the data? Why do you think women naturally invest in building a better future when they get financial or tech resources or both in their hands?
Yeah. So I think this goes back to my nonprofit experiences. People would always ask us at the nonprofit, what do you need? Like, do you need volunteer hours? Do you need us to drop off donations? Like, no, we need money. We need money. And it's great you want to come volunteer and all of that, but we need money. And I remember my husband's boss, when he was early in his career, told him that the best thing that Microsoft gave her was the amount of money to invest in the nonprofits that she loved. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to make money. So yes, I can build solutions, but also so I can give back to my community and to things that I believe in. And I think that women intrinsically, probably because of our deeper empathy that we have, we naturally want to solve problems that we see that are hurting people or that we're impacted by. And so if we have the time before we have the money, we often give our time. And that's why we have less time than a lot of people, because women want to give of our time. But once we are able to have money to give back, it's kind of the first thing that we're ready to donate, to give back to the community, but also to build solutions that will help women and other people that are struggling in different ways to solve those problems and to be able to get out of that. I think we naturally want to see women and communities succeed. So whatever way we can do that, time or money, we want to give back.
Mm-hmm. And for you, you started your co-working space because you saw other parents needing that flexibility and the ability to have childcare or have playtime while also working. Yeah. And then what was it that happened that made you realize that wasn't exactly what you needed to be focused on?
Yeah. So I feel like this is a very motherly thing, but I was nursing on the couch at this co-working space, and I was just thinking about how all of these women had come up to me and men in the last few weeks and were telling me specifically, like, oh, we're frustrated with Upwork or other platforms out there because we have to constantly be on. We have no flexibility with it to build up our profiles. And we really would love a place that's kind of like you, where you're always connecting people to jobs and resources. And I was like, this is a problem that I need to solve. And I'm uniquely positioned to solve because I have this tech experience. experience that I wasn't really using in building a co-working space. And I love the community of it. I love building community, but I had this unique skill set that would allow me to build a tech platform to really amplify flexibility for women.
What do you think some of the misunderstandings are that women have about tech that keep us from leaning into that sector?
Yeah, I think it goes all the way back to childhood and our representations of the fact that we haven't seen a lot of women in tech. We haven't seen a lot of people using technology, specifically as women. So we don't look at it as a path for us. Like, my mom's a teacher, my dad's a preacher, so I never saw a path into technology or even business, or for lack of a better word, but like there was no path in my mind for that until I saw other opportunities for paths. Oh, I have a big mission-driven heart. Well, people are using technology to achieve mission-driven accomplishment. So that was a different path. I saw a way in that wasn't just through another person. And I think a lot of times we think that technology, the only way we can use it is by like being a coder or, you know, building specifically the software. But technology, women use it every day. And I think we need to start flipping that and thinking, well, how can I build using technology instead of technology being the only element to the equation?
Well, it's funny. I met here in Miami, I've met where I come from in Maine, like, this is not a conversation.
I totally agree.
No one's like, I have
so
a tech
many
company.
places, yeah.
And so then I moved to Miami and all these people are like, oh, I have a tech company.
Yeah.
And so I never really knew what that meant. And I met this one particular woman who was telling me about her company. And she was like, I have a tech company. I was just digging deeper and finding, I'm very curious. So I was like, okay, cool. What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does it do? And essentially, she and I have fundamentally the same business. And I was like, wow, that's so interesting. She teaches, it's a content-based educational platform.
Yeah.
And her clients are slightly different than mine, but like it is literally basically the same thing. And I was like, that's so interesting. And I think it just has to do with her educational background and where she came up versus the kind of industry I came up in.
Yeah.
But never in a million years would I ever introduce myself as someone who owns a tech company. But I guess technically as an online business owner, that's what I do.
Yeah.
And your book helped me to see that. And I think to think about technical solutions in a way, you know, we went down the path of possibly building an app. We decided to not do that. You know, all these different things of just really seeing how that could be part of an identity, as opposed to thinking like, oh, that's for other people. I think that was a block that I had, was like, oh, that's not me. That's for other people who like went to Stanford or know how to code. I mean, I know how to like break the back end of WordPress, and that's, that's basically it. Like I know how to like make a word bold from a coding perspective. It's like,
hey, that's something.
Literally about it.
But you spent so much time. I mean, think about how much technology has changed since you started your business.
Yeah, I mean, it was 2000. Well, I mean, technically I started my business 20 years ago, but like in earnest, this iteration of the business started in about 2009.
Well, and think about the shifts just from like Facebook groups to other platforms
Well, when
for community.
I started, nobody used Facebook for business.
Yeah.
It was literally before that time, which is wild.
Well, and I've found, which has been interesting, like the differences between like solo entrepreneurship or bootstrapping companies versus these tech quote unquote companies is honestly, the bootstrappers know way more hacks and ways to get through stuff and can actually build more profitable businesses faster than the other approach of like, oh, I'm going to build this platform, I'm going to spend so much money on it, and I waste all of this money, and then I'm not profitable.
Well, yeah. So let's break that down. I didn't really understand the funding world at all because I just wasn't around it. It never occurred to me to get funding. And actually one of my friends, Ariel Lauren, has been on the podcast, and we talked a lot about the barriers for getting capital to women. And she specializes in getting more capital in the hands of women for their businesses, which was great. So folks we'll link that episode in the show notes. But can you just break down some of the differences? So our business from day one has been focused on profit. I've never taken on investor capital. You know, in the early days, I sort of was like building my business care of MasterCard. So there was definitely
There's a little bit of
capital
investment
in the
there,
form
yeah.
of credit card debt, which I stand by that choice, making some of those investments, which is why in my programs, for anyone listening, I talk about the difference between consumer debt and investment debt. They are not the same thing. All debt is not equal.
Yeah.
And it just never occurred to me to take on investors. And it was just, I don't know that it would have made sense in my business model. But yeah, can you just kind of lay out some of the differences of like a profit-focused business versus a growth-focused business and the bootstrapping versus taking on investment money?
For sure. A lot of people, one of the first questions they ask me is like, why did I decide to raise funding for LOB? And the reason I specifically did is because a mentor asked me, how fast do you want to make an impact? And so for me, I really wanted to make an impact fast. I was like, we're in a very fast moving economy. The pandemic hadn't hit yet, but it was coming, which I didn't know at the time.
When was it that you started Alibi, just to kind of put us in time?
End of 2017. Okay. So that's when I first started. And as it was ramping up, obviously the world changed a lot, but we were already talking about remote work. The gig economy was there and all of that. And so I saw that like stuff is happening and we need to move quickly. And so for me, it was really here's what's going on in the economy. I wanted to make an impact fast. And I thought that the best way to do that at the time was to take on venture capital funding. But I invested myself and in a bit with debt as well into the company originally to get it moving faster. And some days I wish maybe I should have just stuck with that model. But you live and you learn. And I don't regret taking on funding. So the difference between it is really that if you want to take on venture capital funding, you have to show that you have a lot of traction within your company very quickly. So you're bringing on lots of clients or users, depending on what kind of platform or product you're building. And you need to be able to scale that rapidly. So maybe in your business, it was great to get 500 new members or even 200, But this would be like
thousands,
1,000, 2,000, 10,000 plus to be able to reach those milestones. And so there's different milestones. There's pre-seed, seed, Series A, Series B, and that really just looks at how much money is coming into the company. And so I raised about $600,000 for my company, and that was on the lower end, but I knew that we could hit profitability faster. And so I always still had a bootstrap mindset, which I think in the end did me well because I was able to have that amount of money last a lot longer because I was really smart about using that.
And you knew how to bootstrap. So one of the things that I've learned is that some, I won't say many because I have no percentages here. Some people who have only had venture-backed businesses don't actually know how to make a company profitable without just constantly infusing it with cash from investors. Yeah. Which to me is like very smoke and mirrors. Like that's not actually business. That's just taking donations.
Yes.
Can you talk about that? And I'm just revealing the part of myself that's kind of judgy.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you doing?
It's a wild world. And I think it's a lot comes from perspective of like, if people are coming from either business school or they're coming from the startup world, they always have looked at it this way. And
right, because that's how they were taught.
That's how they were taught. And so they see it as my financial model needs to look like this. And it's all a game in many ways.
The entire economy and money is a game.
It's a game.
It's pretend.
It's all
I talk about it all the time.
It is. And you have to kind of take that mindset and zoom out a little bit as you're approaching it. And I think sometimes it's a little hard because you're like, ethically, I'm not sure I'm going to hit that number anytime soon, but I need to show the best that I can in this model to investors that I'm going to be able to hit this.
And like a financial model, just for those who don't understand what you're talking about, is what?
So basically it's projections of what you believe that your company is going to be able to make based off of how many users in that traction that you're growing on a regular basis. So it's, it's fast and it can lose a lot of that community element. It can lose a lot of the flexibility your team might have because you're scaling so rapidly. It's really hard to keep it all intact.
Did that happen to you?
Yes. Definitely.
So as you took on investor money, you were losing some of that flexibility that you had wanted to begin with.
Yeah, for myself, for my team, for our users in many ways too, because we were having to scale at all cost. So when you hear maybe that, you might have heard that in the world of venture capital, but you literally are scaling no matter what. And you have to hit those because you have to keep raising, because you are taking donations in many ways. You have to keep going.
I mean, and just to be clear for, folks listening, like the reason of somebody invests is because they're banking on your company making money so that there will be a payout.
Yes.
It is different than charity when you're not getting that money back. Like the idea is if somebody runs a venture fund, some percentage of the companies they invest in will go big, some will flop, but in the end they come out on top based on the portfolio of companies that they've invested in.
Exactly.
So just to be clear.
Yeah, just to be clear, it's not actually
I was just being, kind of
But
cheeky.
it's a very risky business model. And so I get it from the perspective, and I took it very seriously as a CEO and basically the head of my board at the time, is I have to have that what's called fiduciary responsibility of the money that's coming in to make sure that we're going to see a profit, that there's going to be an exit eventually in some capacity for my investors. So then you're working for somebody.
Yeah. And how did that feel to you?
It definitely,
share whatever you want to share. I'm just curious what that was like.
I think at first, with our first angel investors, they were really behind the mission. And so they were behind the mission and me. And so that made a big difference. And that was really helpful. But as we raised more and as it got to the point where we needed to raise even more to stay alive, it became where I lost a lot of what I loved about the company. Not just the flexibility, but also kind of the soul of the company in many ways, because I was having to lose a lot of why I built the company. It couldn't be as values driven and mission driven at that point. And because scaling at all costs means hurting some element of the business.
In terms of just the heartbeat of
the
values.
Yeah.
And it sounds like in this case, at that core was flexibility for families.
Yeah.
And being able to be present. And so it sounds like what was maybe hurt in that for a short period of time was that ability to go on the field trip with your kids or whatever, what have you.
Yeah.
Now, when you started Allobee, did you set out building to sell?
I think you always do if you want to take in venture capital in some capacity. Very few actually IPO or, get to ring the bell and all of that.
Right.
So you know that some sort of exit path is going to be on the horizon. You don't know how soon that's going to be. I thought it would be, 10 plus years down the road. But you have to be open to kind of whatever the economy and the timing throws at you. And so it definitely wasn't the time I thought I would get an exit. But as I've learned, an exit is an exit. So you have to be kind of open and willing to set yourself a little bit apart from your business as well and figure out what's the best for the business, not necessarily for yourself in that moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds hard.
It does, which I'm sure you can. I mean, as I think any business owner can relate, especially if you put your heart and soul into it and attached your identity to it for so long. It's really hard to do that. But kind of back to that fiduciary responsibility, I had to see what was the best for the company and for my investors because they were really my boss at that point.
Yeah. And so how did you know that the timing was right for the company? How did you know that this was the right decision? Because I have many friends who have been approached to sell and have said no because for whatever reason it was wrong. So if anyone's listening, considering building to sell or in that situation where people are knocking at their door, what's some advice you would pass along?
Definitely spend time talking to a lot of different people and perspectives about where your business is at and other founders, other people that are trying to raise. So we were trying to raise at the time, but 2022 was a wild year in the economy. And so basically come summer of 2022, investors just kind of took a break and they had a very crazy few years. So I don't blame them, but they kind of went silent on everybody. And when women only get 2% of the funding to begin with, when investors go silent, you're in trouble. And so I really spent the summer of 2022 trying to figure out how can I, one, make my company more appealing and profitable for a potential exit, and two, is there any technology we can build into the platform that will help to either make more money for us to keep the lights on or to potentially be, enticing to an exit as well. And I'm glad I spent that summer doing that instead of being too focused on trying to find investors that would talk to me, as it was worthless at that point. And so I told myself I would give myself one more sprint of trying to fundraise in the fall of 2022. And we got some less than desirable terms given to us by some investors. And after talking to my investors and the team, we decided that a path to exit would be better. So we shopped it around and found a home for the company.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was in fall of 2022. And is that when you sold?
Yeah, we literally
the deal was
closed
signed?
on New Year's Eve of 2022.
Wow. Okay, so it's been about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you miss it?
I do in some ways. Now having the perspective of a year and a half, I feel like the idea of my company was a little early.
Oh.
And so, which is interesting to see now, is that actually I think it would have done better now, but we couldn't have kept it alive in that in between. And so that gives me a little peace to like know that that's okay. And that some of the investors that told me that back in 2022 were not wrong, which is great to know that they were paying attention. But we're just now seeing this more niche focused era of technology. And that's really what I had built. But at the time, we were still in the Upwork, very broad era.
Right. Because just to
that.
be clear, the niche of Alibi was people like myself.
Yes.
I was client.
Yes.
People like myself who needed contractors.
Yeah.
And those contractors that you had gathered were moms.
Yeah. They were
Who
almost
also
all moms.
needed flexible work schedule, but were highly skilled and could come in. And it was great as a customer because it was like, if I needed somebody to do graphic design work and one of your people that we had been matched with couldn't do it, they were able to be transferred to another one. It was like, it was quite seamless and the customer service was excellent. So just to be clear, like that was the idea. And I think, I also am someone who has been ahead of the curve on things like when every influencer under the sun is talking about cyclical planning and launching supplement lines around it and whatever. And like when I started talking about that in 2016, 2017, people thought I was nuts. I mean, like, and then back in the 80s and 90s when my mom was talking about it, they were like literally thought she was insane. But anyway, it is what it is, right? And like we hope that, or at least I see it. Some people will, or like then a bunch of big people after I had started talking about do less, a bunch of big people started selling programs about working less and earning more. And I was like early on in the curve of kind of the anti-hustle movement and whatever.
Yes.
And some people will come and be like, oh, did you see this person doing this? Like, doesn't that make you feel whoosy, whatsy, whatever? And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Like, we're all on the same team.
Exactly.
Which brings me to my next question about that 2%.
Yeah.
So only 2% of venture funding goes to women founders.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can really look at the history and understand why that's the case. And so we don't need to go into that. But it is important to understand. Now, for some women, they would take that stat and be like, given that there's such a small pot, I now need to try to take out any other woman founder who's going after those same limited dollars. Is that the perspective you took, or did you go about it differently?
I went about it differently, but I definitely saw that other people were going about it in a ruthless mentality. And I don't particularly blame them. It is a rough world out there. And when you're trying to raise money, you have to be very focused and kind of your blinders on. I do believe that. But I think that I knew, however I was building my business, I needed to do it in the most like ethical way that I could sleep at night.
Yes.
And really, I got into it to support women. I needed to still be supporting women in many ways. And so I really focused on building like alliances and coalitions in many ways with other female founders. One, for the like community support I needed and the literal support of like having a friend to be able to call and go, do you have any advice on my pitch deck or how I can do this better? Because I'm hitting up against this wall with investors right now. Or, do you know this investor investor or have an introduction to this investor for me, because as women, we really need every in that we can get to help us to get that funding, and all of the different support levers that we can pull. And so I really took it as, if I'm going to build this, I need to do it together in community with other women.
Love that. And you had said last night at your book event that you found that the community and collaboration element in my industry, which is personal development, the coaching space, we're like all about community and sharing, but that when you went into the venture world, raising the tech space, it wasn't as much like that, but you were able to bring some of what you had learned about community over into that space. And what were, can you give me, you already sort of did, but do you have a particular example of when your support network was crucial in your journey building and then selling Alibi?
Yeah. So the way I got an exit was because of that community that I had built. So the founder of The Riveter, Amy Nelson, she knew me through some other people that I knew, as well as I was a member of her early co-working space in Seattle. And so having those connections and forming those alliances early on ended up helping me actually get an exit. It's also how I got a book deal. So you have to have those times where you're giving more than you're receiving. You can't do that all the time. And for 3 years, I was definitely taking more than, giving, because I was so focused on building a company. Yeah. But I spent a lot of years giving to people and helping to support them. And that ended up giving back to me so much. And so I think I encourage women a lot, when you're in a more downtime or not as hustle time of your business, make sure that you're still giving back to a lot of people, helping them get into the rooms that they need to, help mentor when you can, and support. You don't have to be a full-time mentor, but jump on a call here and there when somebody asks you. So then when you need to call in a favor, the favors are there to be given, or people are going to remember you. I think that's the best gift that women can give to each other, is to mention them in rooms that they're not in.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think that's such a beautiful way. Sometimes when things maybe are slower in business, by design, or sometimes just because they are, we can go into this sense of this is a problem, right? Because we're so brainwashed to be in perpetual harvest. And there are going to be fallow seasons. There are going to be cover crop seasons. There are going to be seasons where it's just time to have more of a pause. And I think that directive you just gave of make that the season that with that extra time, you also are able to be generously sharing resources, making a connection over here, sharing a piece of wisdom over here. And so often we can think about I don't, if you don't have financial resources to give, or they've been earmarked elsewhere, that is not the only form of generosity. Yeah. And I certainly don't think about it in terms of if I give to this person, I'm going to get back from this person. Right. I see it as a much more global, we reap what we sow sort of thing. Yeah. And it comes usually from somewhere else, and I'm never keeping track, and that's all lovely. Yeah. It sounds like you operate in the same way, but really thinking about this is a time when if things are slower, I can be pouring in to the system.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm really using this season of my life post-exit too. I mean, I knew I was launching a book, so I had that as a busy time. But at the same time, I knew, okay, I didn't make millions of dollars on this exit by any means. Usually don't make a ton as a founder, because you are giving back to your investors and all of the different things. But I knew an exit helped my credibility. Yes. It helped me get into other rooms and have more access. And so maybe that wasn't financial access fully to all of those things, but it did give me time to pause, and it gave me time to give back, which were two things that I went into all of this to start into tech to begin with to do.
They're completely values aligned.
Yep, exactly.
Now, you said that the book deal came from another connection through another community you were part of, which is so cool. Yeah. Was writing a book something that you always wanted to do? or was it a new dream?
Yeah, I've always wanted to write a book. I've been writing in journals since I was a little kid. So I think my mom is probably not surprised at all that I wrote a book. She was like the first one, her and my mother-in-law, to buy like a bunch of copies on pre-order, which was really sweet.
Amazing.
Yeah, they are wonderful supporters of my dreams for sure. But I wasn't sure when that book would get written, especially as you become a mom. Like, time disappears from your ability to do things in some ways, but it also gives you so much more drive to get it done in many ways. And so I knew that when the opportunity would come into play, I needed to say yes. And so even when I got the book deal, which came because this organization, Dreamers and Doers, had presented that Wiley Publishing was looking for new people to write books, specifically women in business and entrepreneurship. And so I just I shot my shot. I threw my name in there, and it didn't happen the first time. But after the exit and getting more credibility, they asked me to write this book, and it's the book that needed to happen at the time that it did.
One of the frameworks you share in it is the GEMS framework, which was inspired by a software, something or other, which I don't understand what it is. So first of all, I keep wanting to ask you, what the frick is Ruby GEMS? Yeah. Can you explain what that is? And then I want to know about how you took it and made it the framework in your book.
So the first programming language I learned was called Ruby on Rails. And I specifically learned that platform because I heard that other places like Airbnb and fast-paced startups had used Ruby on Rails to build quickly and fast to get their product to market.
So is that the same thing as like this is the lady who literally writes by hand asking to So is that the same thing as like, would it be akin to like JavaScript or like...
Yeah, those are all programming
languages. That's literally
languages.
the only other programming language.
So JavaScript, HTML, Java, like there's all, and JavaScript is a programming language too.
Okay.
So they're all different types of programming. Ruby on Rails. Yes. And so Ruby on Rails has a concept called Ruby Gems, which they're basically pre-written code. So it's already written for you, and you can go, okay, I'm just going to grab this and I'm going to throw it into, like you would say, to make it bold on the HTML. So there's just like that. You would throw it into the little brackets.
I do know a little HTML.
You know what? You do. So you would throw it into the brackets within the code. Okay. And it would let you do like basically your whole email management through a gem.
So it's like plug and play.
Plug and play.
Okay,
and so I wanted something for a framework that could be kind of plug and play into your life and make it easier. So it's not stuff that you don't understand or you've never been through. Right. It's something that you can harness and go, wait, well, I had this really gritty moment before. I'm going to pull that and put it into my container because I need more grit in my life today.
Okay, so what is your GEMS framework for the future built by women?
Yeah.
And for women, but also by.
For everybody.
Yes, the future built by women for everyone.
Yes, for everyone.
Yeah.
So it's grit, education, mindset, and support. Okay. And I picked those because I felt that those were themes that kept coming up throughout my whole career and life and were really how I was able to continue to navigate all of this. And when anybody asked me, like, how do you do it all? I'm like, well, this is how I'm able to do it. And I don't do it all, but this is how.
But people do say that.
Yes, exactly. So for grit specifically, I felt like I had a whole bunch of gritty moments before going into writing this book. And that was a huge strong suit of mine. But also it wasn't the only thing that was propelling me. And I think everybody can kind of relate to grit. I think a lot of women don't think they have as much grit, but when you start asking them stories of like hardship or things that have come up into their life and how they got through it, I'm like, there's your gritty moment. Like you have a lot of these. And so we all can relate to that. And then education, it was a huge thing that helped to propel me through different elements of my career. But I really believe in lifelong learning and that we need to continuously be educating ourselves. And it doesn't have to be going back to grad school. It could be reading a book. It could be going and taking a webinar or listening to a podcast. There's so many ways to educate yourself. And then mindset, that was something that I learned probably like 10, 12 years ago. I discovered the world of mindset and then eventually, found you and other people. And it was a huge part of what kept me going in being a founder. And I saw that was a really big missing element for a lot of founders too, that they didn't have really strong mindset. And I think that was a huge way that I was able to build the future. And so I needed that to be a part of it. And then support, that was kind of the foundation of all of it, having support, a supportive spouse, but also a supportive community of other founders, of other business owners that I could lean into, as well as people that support me with my kids, my house, and all of the different elements. So that was the framework, and I really look at it kind of like as a wellness wheel, where there's all these different spokes, but for me, you're going to put them in the container. So how much grit is in your life right now? What do you need to lean into? So I encourage women to look at, what is your superpower right now? We have it in every season. We have like kind of a different superpower. So for me right now, I think my superpower is really this like education, teaching. So that element is really full right now. I've educated myself and now I'm able to go educate others. But in this new era of more visibility, mindset is something that I'm lacking in. So how do I kind of pull in more of those elements? So think about kind of what your superpower is and then how you can bring in these gems to help accommodate that and support that time of your life.
Amazing. I know you also signed up for a marathon and you've been on an incredible wellness journey and have succeeded at 100-pound weight loss, which is remarkable. And I'm curious, what are any of the parallels between your building Alibi journey and that parallel journey? And were they happening at the same time? Okay, because that would seem like a lot.
That would seem like a lot, yeah. It's what I learned from what I didn't do as a business owner. I think, when we start out as building our own business, especially in the world of startups, is that we have every intention to have that flexibility for ourselves. But quickly your time is taken. And especially when you care a lot about the people that are working for you, as my team continued to grow, as our business started growing, as we hit, we're profitable, all these different things. So much of my time got ticked away. And I let it get ticked away in many ways too. And so I went back into the martyr era that I had tried so hard to get away from. And I put myself completely last in all of it. And so another reason that an exit was wise at the end of 2022 is that I was having a lot of health problems. I was burnt out. I was exhausted. Me and my friend Blessing that summer had a lot of conversations about burnout and what was next and, where we all were. Several of us were either selling our company or pivoting our company that were kind of in my little circle of founders at the time. And it's really a lot falls on the women, all of the invisible labor, all of that is just a whole nother level, and the lack of funding and all of that. And so honestly, when I did sell my company, there was a lot of relief there too, that like now, okay, I need to shift my energy back to myself. And so I've spent about over a year now really focused on me. And so now I'm like, it's a different shift because I'm like, I don't want to give up this time that I have for myself. And so it's a different perspective. Yeah. But I don't think I truly
just really
felt
want to affirm that you don't have to.
I know you don't. And I love it. And so after this, I'm going to go run. but yeah, I mean, you have to find something, I think, that you want to. Running was really hard for me at the beginning. And so I looked at it as kind of like building a company is really hard. I needed something to be hard for me.
That's grit part of you.
The grit part of me. I needed it to be hard. I always thought I was bad at running. And so it was like, you know what? Let me take this on. Like, people told me I couldn't build a tech company. Did that. So let me figure out what would be hard for me. I'd written a book already. So like, what can I do? And so running, it was kind of the thing. And so, yeah, I'm running the Disney Marathon in January on my birthday.
So fun.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Why do you think you need things to be hard?
I don't think I need everything to be hard in life. I like a lot of, I'm a projector. So I like my space. I like to take rest. So don't want everything to be hard. But I think I need a project to be hard for myself.
Like to keep you engaged.
To keep me engaged. I need that like focus, that learning, it's really my GEMS framework in so many ways. I need that. I found support in running friends and community. I've educated myself on running. I've gotten the mindset on running. And then putting in the work is really the grit that you have to keep showing up. So it was my when I wasn't building a company, my time to kind of like focus in. And I do see that some of the best founders out there and best business owners put themselves first. And so if I want to start something again, I knew that this needed to be the shift that I needed to make.
So powerful.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy running now?
I do now.
You do now.
Yes, I do now. But I think every runner would say that like some days you just really don't want to run. But most days I really do enjoy it. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a miracle. I've enjoyed going for a run twice in my life.
Yeah. And I used to, I hated it. And like even it was about a year ago, I ran my first, like it was, I skipped to the 8K instead of a 5K because it was just a run in town. It's called the Running of the Bulls because I live in Bull City, which is Durham. And so everybody has cowbells as you're running through Durham. And it's really fun. And so I'm running that one again, and I'm like 20 minutes faster than I was last year, which is just
amazing.
Consistency.
Right.
So it's all
Just
consistency.
showing up.
It's just showing up.
And
That's all
then
it is.
January will be your first marathon.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed.
And I told my husband, I really want to run the Disney marathon. I just randomly asked him, do you want to run it too? And he was like, well, I mean, yeah, I guess if you get in, I'll do it. And I was like, are you sure? Because I'm signing up and you can't back out. So now he's committed to a marathon, and I'm not sure he was ready for it, but he needs to spend more time focused on himself. And so this was my like little push to make him do that. Yeah.
Are you doing any of the training together or always separate?
I think we'll end up doing some together, especially long runs, which will be really good because long runs can get kind of boring without somebody else. So
I would imagine.
We'll see how he's running this 8K with me in 2 weeks. So we'll see how it goes.
So I know your supportive partner has been an incredibly important part of your journey, and there is such a significant care gap. There's such a significant, that the whole movement, Fair Play, and the book and the documentary and, the whole account, and really seeing the inequity in terms of where the labor falls, who is holding the mental load, who's holding the emotional load. Was that something in your own family that needed to be renegotiated at all as you were growing Alibi, or did you just have it kind of like dialed in with your agreements already?
Yeah, definitely. It needed to make a shift right in the midst of the pandemic. So me and my husband, Edgar, have had a great supportive relationship, honestly, since the beginning. He's my second marriage, so I had a horrible first marriage. And so I think I just was luckily blessed with a really great second one. And I learned a lot about myself through that too. And so I think that we had a really good base. So I'll say that first and foremost. But as the world shut down and we had our kids home, and I was in the midst of we had just raised our first funding in 2020. And so we were in massive scale mode. And so I didn't have the opportunity to pause at that moment. And so we really needed to lean in. And that's actually right when Fair Play was kind of coming out. And so actually Eve, who wrote Fair Play, interviewed me and my husband, and we almost were in the documentary, but then we couldn't get out to California for recording stuff. But it really impacted us because we realized how much more we needed to lean into each other to make it all work for both of our dreams. And so we wouldn't stay in too much of the martyr mode. We're both martyr people. So it was really hard to kind of navigate that as a couple. But one thing that worked for us was really actually finding what her second book is about, is unicorn space, and taking that devoted time, each one of us, for our passion. So my husband fell into like a spiritual yoga mindset journey, and I fell back into loving writing again and taking that time. And so by taking those creative pursuits, we claimed that time together, and then everything started to fall back into place to make it a lot better. So it was huge for us and helped us a lot.
Great. That's really great. That concept is new to me, unicorn time. I haven't really been following along. So,
but you've been doing it in so many ways.
Well,
so,
it's cool though, that because I think that it would be my initial thought about creating equity in the home around emotional labor, invisible labor, would be like the logistics of it. So who's doing the laundry, who's taking out the trash, who's buying the birthday presents, who's like planning the holidays, that. And I love, this is a perfect example of like the solutions that we seek are often not on the spectrum of thinking where we're thinking, that actually the solution is, yes, sure, you do need to figure out who's taking out the trash and like doing the laundry, but that like actually the solution is committing to creative time for yourself.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to go
Well, and
research.
I think and Eve, I think saw this through her work too, is once her and her husband had kind of mastered the logistics, which I'm sure you and Mike and me and Edgar too, we kind of had gotten to that point, but there was still something that wasn't quite there. And as soon as we were able to have that time for ourselves, and as soon as those start to disappear in any way, we can tell very quickly that I'm not taking that time for myself. I'm not, committed to that. And so once you have that committed unicorn space. So for me right now, it's writing, but also running is quite a bit of that element too. And I think because I already gained, I don't think you should make that just working out shouldn't just be your unicorn space. But for me, it gives me that mindset and creativity time. So it's a lot Julia Cameron's writer's date or artist time. Date. And so just finding that time to do those things are so important and vital.
So you've been on book tour. It's been, this is pretty recently out and you've been very life is full with that. But I am curious, are you already, and you don't have to give me any details, of course, but are you already thinking about new problems that you would like to solve with possible future endeavors?
Yeah. So I have a notes app on my phone that has all of my parking lot ideas forever.
I love it.
And Allobee was the idea that stuck, as my husband says, in so many ways, and it was. And so I don't think I have an idea that has stuck yet. I've really enjoyed helping other people with their ideas right now, so that's been fun to help support people in that early idea phase, and I hope the book also helps with that in many ways. But I think that you try to run from the areas. For me, I was in the future of workspace for so many years and loved it, but also as the acquisition happened, I was I need to run away from this. I'm tired of being in this space. But something always pulls you back to things that you really know and are good at. And so I definitely feel pulled in that direction in some capacity, but it's changed. The space has changed. I think that more talk is happening about care and the care gaps and how I knew this and was trying to build with that in mind. But I think there's a lot of really cool things that are on the horizon. But I really believe that, you have to be open to the universe's timing in many ways. So I told myself not to jump. I will jump on things and move fast. And so I told myself I needed 6 months after this book came out to really make a decision about what was next. And so I'm open and excited, but spending a lot of time educating myself on the new trends and things that are happening with technology, but also in the spaces that I'm interested in. So we'll see. To be determined.
TBD.
Yes.
I love that you're giving yourself a chunk of time, a solid chunk. Do you think, based on your experience, having both bootstrapped and taken on investor capital, would you do it again? Would you take on investors again?
Yeah, no.
Thank you for your honesty.
No, and at first I dabbled with it. My husband's been like, "Oh, we should build a company together," and he would get funding by going to one meeting because he's a vet, a man, a European, and he's worked at all the major tech companies and he's in security. So it's we would get funded in 2 seconds. So it's appealing, in some ways, but I'm but no, the reason he wants to build a company or I want to build a company is the flexibility and for us to own it. And so I'm I won't. We can bootstrap it and sell it fast. That's fine with me. But no, I won't take it on. I think that for me personally, it's not the right decision. And I think a lot of women hear that it's appealing because you get money to build your dream, but they really need to think about what they're getting themselves into. And if you really believe in what you're building and it is mission driven and focused in values and the way that something that you really want to see come to fruition, I suggest not taking funding. But if it's something that, is not that in some capacity, I think it can be great. So it just depends on what your end result looks like for you. It's very personal, I think.
So wise.
Yeah.
So wise. So if people want to connect and learn more, obviously they need to get themselves a copy of The Future Built by Women. I just want to say that what I love about this book is how tactical it is. So for those listening, there's sections that literally take you step by step how to build your minimum viable product, your MVP, how to vet an idea, I don't think that I have ever read a book that is so practical in terms of the how-to of the building stage. So if you've got an idea in you, get this book. Honestly, certainly if it's a tech idea, but it's highly applicable.
Yeah.
Even if you were building like a wooden bowl company.
Right.
Which would have tech elements, by the way.
Yes, we're all using tech. Women use technology more actually than men do on a regular basis.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't have to think of yourself as a tech person, which I do not,
Yeah.
in order for this book to be highly valuable. So get the book. And then where else should they connect and come find you?
So you can find me at my first name, last name.com. So BrookeMarkevicius.com. That's where kind of everything lives. And then the book also has a resource guide, which is really great. So that is at thefuturebuiltbywomen.com. And it really is kind of a mini course based off of the book. So I'm always adding resources and things that are changing with technology that I talk about in the book. So you kind of get a free little course if you buy the book.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you for your generosity.
Of course.
So phenomenal. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Plenty. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review. That's one of the best ways that you can ensure to spread the abundance of plenty with others. You can even text it to a friend and tell them to listen in. And if you want even more support to expand your abundance, head over to katenorthrup.com/breakthroughs, where you can grab my free money breakthrough guide that details the biggest money breakthroughs from some of the top earning women I know, plus a mini lesson accompanying it with my own biggest money breakthroughs and a nervous system healing tool for you to expand your abundance. Again, that's over at katenorthrup.com/breakthroughs. See you next time.